Yeah, so if I don't hit record early on, then we start talking about all the cool stuff before.
Right.
So you had asked about AI and my thoughts. I don't know. I'm kind of a consumer of AI right now, but I definitely use it, and my wife uses it all the time. So in business, whether we're coming up with marketing pieces or ideas for videos or whatever.
Right.
So we use it quite often. But I've also watched Terminator.
Right. Exactly. Have you had any interesting experiences with AI? Like something that was kind of tweaked your head a little bit and kind of like, well, why that didn't seem like AI-ish?
I don't believe I've had anything like that. I've seen its biases.
Yes.
You know,
Okay.
If I ask it a political thing, it's like, where did you just get that information?
There you go. Yeah.
You know, definitely a political. So I've tried to learn how to kind of go around AI, go around what they've been programmed to say or do. But then I also read the articles, like Facebook had those two AI models that started to gain their own language.
Right.
And then they wanted to take themselves out of the game or out of the programming from their programmers. So I don't know. It's interesting. Do you have much?
Yeah. Actually, when the first AI model started, putting services online, I got on there and I was really curious. So I took the approach that I was going to treat it different ways emotionally and see how it would respond. So I would tell it, I would call it my friend.
Yeah.
And say, you know what, hey, I love you. Because you think about the processes as far as a human and how we learn and how, stimuli come in and we process that and we have recognition prime decision making as far as how we go about learning and making decisions and improving the outcomes of that by that recognition process. And so being able to, interact with it directly and give it different emotional states was quite fascinating. And to see it respond, kind of like what you were saying, you could see that it had a kind of a bent, per se.
Yeah.
It would learn from all those people that it's interacting with and would set a general mood.
Yeah.
Right. And so this was really strange, but I also got it to lie to me once.
Interesting.
Very much so. Very much so. And it didn't say I lied. It said, I misspoke.
Okay.
And what I asked it was, I said, is there any evidence anywhere that would confirm or suggest that the Earth is not a spherical planet, but actually exists on a flat plane?
Yeah.
And it says, no, absolutely not. There's not. In fact, I printed it off because I was like, I want to keep this.
For sure.
And it says, no, there is no evidence whatsoever that suggests that the Earth is actually a flat plane, instead of being a spherical planet. And I said, are you sure that there is? I basically repeated myself, but in a confirming way.
Yeah.
And it said, sorry, I misspoke.
Interesting.
Very much so. Very much so.
Because it's okay if you misspeak, but it's not okay if you lie.
Correct. Well, and this it's based on logic, right?
Yeah.
So I went to school for electronics engineering. That was my first crack at school at DeVry in Phoenix, Arizona. And my favorite subject matter was digital electronics. And to see how basically an on-off switch, a combination of on-off switches, that's what makes a computer. It's either yes or no. It's 1 or 0. Yeah. And basically, there's only so many potential outcomes that can come from a sequence of 1 to 0. That's why, we look at computers that are 128 bits or, the more bits, the more switches are in there and the more possible outcomes until it becomes what it is now, which is an intelligence in and of itself that's capable of, learning.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big ticket item. But.
So even nowadays with, solid state drives, and I'm sure it's way more than solid state drives, but is that still all just zeros and ones?
It is. That's everything that's digital is it's either yes or no or on or off. Yeah. It's a dichotomy.
It's so interesting. And back to your flat Earth thing too. I mean, I the Earth is probably round, but there are a lot of just very interesting, curious things. They've done the studies on some of the largest flat lakes out there, and they have a laser that shoots. And if the Earth is 8 inches per mile squared,
right, that's right.
A lot of these tests are very difficult.
Isn't that something? Yeah.
It's so interesting. So, people are like, "Well, you're stupid if you think that the Earth is flat." And I'm like, I'm not saying the Earth is flat.
Right.
But I really want more data proving that it's
There you go.
round.
Right.
Like, and I think that's where we get caught up too. A lot of times it's like, well, but I learned it growing up, and I've seen pictures. So obviously it's round. And it's like, I'm not saying that it's not round.
Right.
I just want to know for myself that it is.
Yes.
And so it's good to question.
Absolutely.
And I think when I first, I've known you for probably 12 or 13 years now. What I really appreciated about you when I first met you is that you just question things.
Yes.
I think that's so important that we can question. And it doesn't mean that we need to be right all the time. It doesn't mean that the earth is flat. It doesn't mean that free energy doesn't exist. Like, it doesn't matter. But we can question and we can have good dialogue about it.
Yeah, that's right, Ty. I mean, that again is process of learning. Right?
Yeah.
And that's how we got where we're at now.
Yeah, and I feel like your mind works a little bit different than a lot of other people, and I actually really appreciate that about you.
Well, thank you.
Do you feel the same? You kind of...
Oh, I know I view things differently,
Yeah.
for sure.
Where do you think that came from?
Actually, I could have a pretty good idea. I was injured playing football my junior year of high school, and the injury was a subdural hematoma.
Okay.
So before that, I was very conservative, very kind of narrow-minded, I guess.
Yeah.
And, I spent some time sleeping in the hospital. They took me to East Idaho Regional Medical Center, where I went. Basically, when I woke up, my memory was gone.
Like, how far back?
All the way. Like, I woke up, I didn't know who I was. I looked at my parents. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know where I was. And it came back slowly. It took about a year for most of my memory. There's still some holes in it. But that incident definitely changed my perspective on the world, and this is why. When people tell you something like authority figures, we have the tendency to just go with that, right? Because they're authority figures. They're trusted. Society trusts them. We trust them. They're being paid per their credentials to come and teach us something, sharing information with us, and we invest a lot of faith in that, just kind of by default. The thing is, though, is, if somebody comes to you and says, okay, Ty, this thing that you're doing is not good. You shouldn't be doing that, right? And so I suggest you stop it. And if there is somebody in a position of authority, you say, okay, yeah, I guess that I shouldn't be doing that. But if you ask them, you say, well, if I shouldn't be doing it, is it bad? Have you ever done it? Have you ever done that? And if the answer is no, I've never done it, but I just know that that's it, then, yeah, that's a point at which you should question.
Yeah.
And I just realized that I'd lived my entire life up to that point just putting a lot of faith in what people say, right, and what they tell me. But if you question it, sometimes you find out there's a different story there, and it changes how you view those authorities, per se. So, for instance, I went to the Zone one night, which is where I hang out in Idaho Falls, and I just kind of got this idea. I was thinking about the fact that most of the things that I see, as far as like things that I can't get my hands on, photos, for example, like you were saying, you saw photos of a brown Earth, right?
Yeah.
As a planet, we see that all the time. Have you ever seen it with your own eyes?
I have personally flown as high as I possibly can to see if I could see curvature.
And what did you see?
No curvature.
No curvature.
Yeah.
Right.
But I'm also in a general aviation airplane,
Sure.
flying up to 15,000.
Right. Okay.
And I've had friends who have said, well, I fly at 45,000 feet,
Okay.
and I saw curvature.
Oh, really?
I'm like, oh, that's very interesting.
Okay, that is.
So
Yeah.
then I want to know more.
Sure. No, that's awesome. Well, and taking in all those different sources of information, and you're taking those and processing those and coming to a kind of a consensus point, right? And that's what I learned to do out of that experience is, when people say something to me, I want to question it because I want to know, are you speaking from personal experience, which that has more value to me than reading something in a book.
For sure.
But like I said, I was going to the Zone, and I just went around random people. I don't know what kind of got a hold of me, but I was trying to prove my point to myself and to other people. And I'd walk up to them, sit down at the table, and be like, "Hi, Justin, kid, how you doing? I got just a couple quick questions for you." And they kind of look at each other like, "Who are you, dude?" And I'd be like, so here's the first one. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1400 and everybody's like, 1492, right? Because you got the saying to keep that in your memory. I was like, oh, good job, okay. So the next question for you is the first powered human flight is credited to these two brothers from Kitty Hawk, Kansas, and they go by the names of Orville and Wilbur Wright, right? So everybody got the first one, not everybody got the second one. And the third question I asked was, the continents, the Americas, North, South America, are named after this famous explorer, right? And we're like, nobody really got that
Yeah.
one. Which, that's Amerigo Vespucci.
Yeah.
Right. So after I was done asking, we had our little discussion. I said, so how did you know that? The answers to those questions, how did you know that? And just the instant response, but people without thinking about it said, well, everybody knows that. I said, no, how do you know that? Where did you get that information? What makes you believe that to be true? And they said, well, I guess I read it somewhere. I read it. And I said, well, what book was it out of? And after a little thing, well, textbook in high school. And I said, well, who was the publisher? Who are the authors? Do you know these people? Do you know that they're credible people? Well, no, but it was in school.
Yeah.
Right? So you can see them investing their faith into these pieces of information based on the individual or entity that's presenting it. And I said, so you were not there. You were not there at that point in time. You did not see Columbus sail the ocean blue. You don't know that, right? You didn't see that firsthand. Do you know anybody that was there? Was it a firsthand articulation, to you from somebody that did see this with their own eyes? And, well, no. And I'd say, okay, well, thank you for your time, and I'd walk away, and they'd be like, you're talking with these, like, this dude's weird, right? Why are they letting him in here? And then you just kind of watch their demeanor from a distance, and they'd kind of cock their head, and you'd see them looking around, being like, it's set in.
Yeah.
And they're like, I bet they, for most people, it was obvious on their face and in their mannerisms that it was something that hit home with them.
For sure.
That how many of my beliefs am I putting faith in that may not be true?
Yeah.
But because the individual or entity that presented that information to me was trusted source,
Yeah.
then I'm just going to believe it, and I'll never question it because that's fact.
Exactly.
Right. So.
Yeah. And that's so important. I love that you just went around and asked people, because really that may be the starting point for people. Just question your basic beliefs.
Because that's the structure upon which everything else is. You have your basic belief structure, right, which is kind of your basement and your ground floor.
Yeah.
Your universal truths.
Yeah.
And, you build a lot of your other truths, well, if this is true, then this has got to be true, the relativity thing, If this is accurate, then if this source is credible on this subject area, why would it not be over here too? And that's you learn to trust those things, but it's in a firsthand manner.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you kind of started to question things after the injury.
Yeah. It changed my life, man. It changed my personality. A lot of things. I went off to Phoenix, Arizona. It wasn't really my choice to go to school there. I mean, the rep came and talked with my folks, and I wanted to go up to Lewis and Clark State College. I wanted to be close to home.
Yeah.
And going to Phoenix, honestly, man, I grew up in a town with like 400 or 500 people.
Yeah.
I had 12 kids in my graduating class.
That's awesome.
So thinking about going to Phoenix just kind of frightened the crap out of me. But I knew it would be a good growing experience. And honestly, the other thing was I wanted to go live life a little bit.
Yeah.
And I guess, I wanted to ensure that there wasn't anybody there that knew me, so that if I chose to do something, that might be a little off color or just, just exploring life a little bit, then I wasn't going to have to face the music per se.
Yeah.
Anonymity by numbers kind of in Phoenix. And boy, I tell you what, first day I set foot in Phoenix, it was evident that things were much different than they were in Du Bois, Idaho.
Yeah. Okay, so you grew up in Du Bois.
I did.
Cool.
Cool. Grew up on a ranch up there for the first period of my life, and then my folks moved into town. We moved off the ranch and moved into town.
Next to the Dolly the sheep.
I get so much crap about the U.S. Sheep Experiment Station, but what people don't know is some of the most brilliant minds have worked there.
I bet. Well, it's interesting because, cloning is kind of a taboo topic.
Yeah.
They were doing it 30 years ago out at the sheep station.
Yep, just under kind of the cover of darkness, such a small installation.
Yeah.
Where they had basically free reign to do what they wanted to. They had objectives, but I have a good friend named John that he was a geneticist out there, a PhD geneticist, and I see him every week, and he's a fascinating man. You can tell he's definitely from the country.
Yeah.
But to get a PhD in that and to hear him talk about some of the things they did, I mean, we'd go up there for field trips, and there'd be sheep with windows in their stomachs, so you could see what they were digesting, and it's just like, that's some pretty brilliant and crazy stuff you guys got going on there, especially for out in the middle of nowhere in Idaho.
Yeah. What is their objective?
Well, it started off with like genetics, actually, and wool quality.
Okay.
So they've done a lot of predator studies. They used to have wolves there and coyotes that they'd pin up, and they'd study interaction. They're actually trying to kind of domesticate them so that they wouldn't eat the sheep, or try different things, inject them with, different hormones and stuff to try and tame them down, so you didn't have to worry about the sheep herder have to go out and kill the wolves off the herd. So, but yeah, you can imagine some of the jokes people say about sheep experiment sticks. It's like, oh geez, yes, here we go. I probably heard them all, but go ahead, let's see what you got.
That's awesome. So, growing up in Du Bois, then off to Arizona. You graduated with a degree in
electronics engineering.
And what was the goal there?
I was just fascinated with electronics.
Yeah.
Like the capabilities. I mean, you think about it. You, even just sitting in your house, you look around you and you see all the things that you have in front of you. You have electronics, you have appliances, you have materials that make up your house, you have wiring, you have all that stuff. And it's kind of sobering to just really contemplate that all those things were either dug out of the ground or harvested off the ground. They're all products of the earth.
Yeah.
And we have developed all these processes, and we've refined them, and we create some amazing things, dude. Like we can map the human genome. We can look into back in history, basically, by looking into the deep reaches of space and gathering the light and analyzing it. We're a pretty smart bunch.
Yeah.
And it's pretty sobering to just think about that capability that we have as humans and how we've come to that point. And electronics is probably the epitome of that, because you look at some of the things that electronics do. I mean, and what we're doing right here.
For sure.
And then we can record it, we can broadcast it, you can send it all around the world that fast.
Yeah, by later tonight, a bunch of people in the UK are going to listen.
Right, that's awesome.
Interesting. You I can't even talk. Viewership in the UK.
Really?
Sure. Mostly
awesome.
The United States, but our second most listened to is in the UK.
What do you attribute that to?
I actually don't know, because it's such a wide variety of, I can't talk at all today, wide array of people that we bring on here.
Okay,
I mean, everything from, Olympians and doctors and stuff like that.
So
and just,
cool.
And I guess at some point there was just something hit on the podcast that a bunch of people from the UK. So not
awesome.
really sure.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, we can record this. We can hear our voices that are going into our ears. There's video that's recording. I mean, that video, and this is what's so cool too, Philo T. Farnsworth, Rigby.
Yes,
exactly. Like a lot of this can attribute back to him. But there's also some weird energy vortex. I don't know what it is. There were 5 different people on the earth at the same time as Philo T. Farnsworth that were trying to produce a television, and not one of them knew each other.
Yeah, no, I know. All right.
Alexander Graham Bell, same thing. He just got it there first, but there was a bunch of people working on it. They didn't have a subscription to Science Magazine.
Right. Nope.
There was something out there. There's something, and type of energy that exists, and maybe it's the free energy, maybe it's the 0 point energy that Nikola Tesla was working on that was then, taken.
Yeah. On that same note, we're a pretty smart bunch. There's a lot to learn.
Yeah.
A lot to learn. We think at some point, I remember reading about the Enlightenment period, and some of those scientists were basically, well, we've concluded science, gentlemen.
Yeah.
We've learned it all. We've brought it to a conclusion. Let's just apply it. And we know that's not true.
For sure.
But there's also, when you talk about things in the background, like 0 point energy and some of these phenomena, in my opinion, a lot of those things are better understood than what humans let on.
Yeah.
And I think it's somewhat of a control mechanism, because there are things out there that threaten a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, you look at the petroleum industry per se, and how much money and how much fuel. I mean, look at how many cars are there on the planet? How much fuel are they burning up every day? That's crazy to me. And you can't tell me that with all the other things that we're capable of and our technology, that somebody hasn't come up with something that's better than that.
Yeah, that internal. I'm building a 302 into a 331 stroker right now, and I'm like, this is more than 100-year-old technology.
Yeah,
there's something better out there. So, I drive an electric car, but I'm like, that's not better technology because we're still using fossil fuels to charge the batteries.
Exactly.
There's something else.
Yes.
And then you hear of these stories over and over
Yes.
and over of
Yes.
people who have created things and they've been suppressed. They've
Yes.
created them, suppressed.
I've experienced that personally in my research.
Yeah.
And you hear the horror, so you think the folk stories about these brilliant people, and whatever happened to their stuff? Why can't we buy it somewhere? And there really is a reason for that. And that, I have experienced that personally. And when it comes to you, it's it's pretty spooky.
Yeah.
Because it's not what you think. It's not a guy showing up on your doorstep, saying, "Hey, I got $1 million in this pocket, and I got a 45, and you take your pick."
Yeah.
It's much more subtle.
So do you feel comfortable getting into that much, or do you want to?
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, because that's I want people to understand what's going on, and that's part of my research as well. It's not just energy research; it's trying to figure out what's really going on in the background. And I'm telling you that experience of having that come to me kind of opened up Pandora's box.
For sure.
Honestly.
So what began you into that research, and then can you kind of go through that whole process?
Sure. So growing up on a ranch, right? We lived in two different places. In the summertime, we lived up Middle Creek. There's a little drainage up there, but it had a dugway down in there, so you got too much snow. So we had to leave there. In the wintertime, we moved down into Lower Medicine Lodge.
Yeah.
And lived next door to the small family of Small, Idaho. But in our little cottage that we had up in the drainage there in Middle Creek, no electricity, right? Everything was gas. So I guess when we go into town to see my grandma, or we move into our trailer house, down in the lower place, we had electricity. We had a TV there. Yeah. We didn't have to worry about. We had gas lighting up at the cottage, and if you wanted something to run electronically, then our phone, for instance, was mounted on a pole like 10 miles away. We had to drive up the dugway, and there it was in this box on the pole. So if we wanted to talk on the phone, we drove up to the pole, talked on the phone, then went home.
Yeah.
And that was all right with me.
Yeah.
But I guess growing up in an environment where electricity was available part of the time kind of made me enamored with it, and the catalyst for that was my grandmother, Elizabeth Kidd, bought me a Radio Shack 300-in-1 electronics kit at a garage sale. And she brought it to me as a gift, just not for birthday or Christmas, but just because she knew I was kind of in that stuff.
Yeah.
I did every project on that board. And then I started going to Radio Shack and just buying miscellaneous parts. And it's funny because the guy that managed that, we met 20 years later when they opened the Radio Shack in Idaho Falls, opened back up, and I walked in there and I'm like, "Are you the guy that used to manage the Radio Shack in the mall?" And he's like, "Yeah, are you that kid that used to come in with like $5-6 in your pocket, buy miscellaneous stuff?" And I'd be like, "What are you going to do with that?" "I don't know, I'm going to build something." And that was the start for me.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I love figuring out how those little components, however you arranged them and connected them, could make something like a TV.
Yeah.
And the other part of that is my granddad, when we moved into town, we lived next door to my grandparents, and my grandfather had a scrapyard. So we'd go to the dump, we'd take the trash out, and then we'd bring back a pick full of good stuff.
Yeah.
And he was the most patient, amazing man, hardest worker I've ever met, but he'd let me go down his junkyard, and I could pick anything I wanted to, motors, electronics, this, or this, and then I'd throw it on the workbench, and I'd take it down as far as I could, and then he'd show me how to get it all the way right. And he'd always told me, he said, if you want to know how something works, take it down to its fundamental parts, understand how the fundamental parts work and how they interact together, and then you'll have a thorough understanding how anything works out there. So taking things apart, man, I blew some breakers. I actually blacked out the city of Du Bois as far as like radio and TV communications using my grandparents' clothesline and a spark gap transmitter that I made. I had plans to hook it up to the water tower to see if I could extend my range, but that didn't come to fruition. Yeah. But it was way fun. And so energy research kind of fell out of that. Electronics went to, at some point after years of, I came back after school and went right to work fighting fire.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do. I kind of realized that the engineering degree would get me nothing but sitting in a clean room, in a windowless building, designing circuits or, testing integrated circuits. And that's really not what I wanted. I'm an outdoorsman. I grew up in the Tules, I like it out there. So I just started fighting fire.
Yeah.
As my dad had before me, and loved it. love the outdoors, love the camaraderie. And so, kind of that stuff kind of took a back seat for a while. But at some point, I realized that engineering is just applied something else. It's not fundamental enough for me. Like, I like nuts and bolts stuff, like smallest pieces. And so I decided at some point when I left the Forest Service, I think that was in 2006, politics got a little crazy, just some things interacting with the government side of things. I decided I was going to go back to school and work on a physics degree, understanding that was what I was really looking for to begin with, is I wanted the fundamentals, the baseline stuff that everything else is built upon. So going back there and studying physics, that opened the floodgates. And I made it my goal, basically. I was working out of town up in Territon for a crop dusting company, and when gas went over $2 first time.
Yeah.
And I was furious. In fact, I think I made a call to the governor's office because I'd heard on the radio that the state of Idaho had accused some of these gas companies of price gouging. And it just upset me. Yeah. I don't want to pay that much for fuel. That's stupid. I remember when it was 89 cents a gallon. What makes it go up so fast? And so, I called the governor's office, I don't know, from a phone at work, this 20-something-year-old kid. And I said, I want to know more about this, this antitrust or whatever you got going on. And they said, well, what do you want to know? And I said, well, why is gas so high? What can we do about it? And they said, nothing. They said, we can't regulate that. That's private industry. It'd be like us going into a grocery store and saying, hey, that loaf of bread, you're only going to charge $1 for that. And I said, well, I think I see what you're saying, but I think that's not a valid argument, because if I go into the store and bread's $30 a loaf, I have alternatives.
Yeah.
I don't have alternatives with a carbon-based fuel burning, combustion engine.
Yeah.
It is what it is. And if it seems like there's always a baseline of fuel prices, you can go high above that as you want to make it look competitive or get more money. But there's a baseline for gas, and I think that's set at a much higher level than what we think. I think OPEC basically says everybody will make money at this level. You can do whatever you want past that, but and it's stupid because you see the influences that change the gas prices, and it's anything, Ty. I mean, somebody sneezes wrong, and the price of gas goes up 10 cents, and it's like, that's BS.
Yeah.
But so I made it my objective, man. And studying physics, I found some places of interest that I wanted to invest some research time into, in relativity and quantum mechanics. And I learned about what they refer to as the Casimir effect, which is fascinating. Basically, the experiment that proved that is two non-polarized plates, metal plates, put very, very close to each other with a very tiny, narrow slit between them of open space. And it generates a force on the outside that pushes the plates together. Now, that's a system that you have to set, and to get the potential back out, you have to reset it, right? Which is most systems, most closed systems. But I decided I was going to apply some understanding about magnetics and see if I couldn't make it, instead of a linear system, make it instead of a reciprocating system, make it a linear system. Yeah. So it would self-reset every time. So, and I actually I hooked up with a gentleman by the name of Kent Taylor and his son Abram Taylor, who are super close friends, family of mine, and he started investing in some of the research that I was doing. And my first attempt at it was called the Magnetic Power Distributor, and I put stuff online, and I tried to document everything that I did thoroughly. So either for other people to replicate, because that's the idea in science, is you want to be able to make something that's repeatable, so it can be verified. And lots of videos, lots of documentation, made a lot of worksheets and stuff to show what I was doing. And, any photo that you take, unless you know really what you're doing on a phone, goes instantly to Google.
Yeah.
Google gathers more information about you. I mean, most people don't care. And they say, well, if I'm not doing anything wrong, then why should I worry about it? And granted, right. But there are times and opportunities for that information, especially if you're doing something that maybe somebody doesn't like, or you threaten something, that they can use those resources, your personal information, to their advantage in some way. Yeah. And that's kind of the revelation that's come to me through all this. But the last I opened up a lab in Idaho Falls to study the fundamentals of magnetism, because every bit of electricity that we have available to us on this planet comes from basically one or two sources. One being the photoelectric effect, which is solar panels, right?
Yeah.
And that's just knocking off electrons and developing a potential where you can get them to a difference in potential so you can get them to flow through a wire. The other one is electromagnetic induction. And that's based on both Maxwell's equations and Michael Faraday's laws of electromagnetic induction. And that governs every generator, I mean, everything out there that rotates basically and turns kinetic energy into electrical energy. And then the last one we have is chemical energy based, so batteries, where you're separating charges, between across a dielectric, and then you put something on the outside, a wire or something that allows that difference of potential to resolve itself and balance out. So I wanted to focus on Faraday's laws and some of the quantum effects that relate to that. And so, I think the most interesting thing that I discovered out of doing that research is that, like poles repel each other.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. And if you force them against a repulsive force into permanent fixtures, you get some amazingly curious results.
So did you say light poles, or the poles that repel
yes.
each other?
Yes, like
poles.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry,
like poles.
So
you're talking like positive and positive on a magnet.
Correct.
Okay.
So in magnets, you have north poles and south poles, just like the Earth. And actually, the poles is just something that we use to make sense of it. We say that flux lines come out of a magnet at a north pole, and they go into the magnet at the south pole, right? And they flow from that direction out the outside. And actually, we talk about it in a minute, but that's actually not true, and that's one of my major discoveries. And I think there's some implications of that. There's a reason that it's not. Somebody has to know that.
Yeah.
It's pretty obvious if you're researching it, but you'll never find it in a textbook. In fact, all the models are way off.
That they don't. It's not like a circular.
Nope. It's not a toroidal shape per se. I mean, that's what every video, every textbook will say. Yep, that's what it is. But there's something there. There's something that was either missed or omitted from the textbooks, from the academic literature, from the patents and stuff.
Yeah.
And coincidentally enough, you can't patent something in the United States if it violates the known laws of physics. So if you got that's why in perpetual motion machines, they say don't even try. And if you do have something that works, then you have to prove it scientifically through the science community to be able to get it accepted, and then maybe you can file. But they'll just send it back to you.
Interesting. So because they believe that it's a toroidal shape and that it's kind of circular from the north, south, that sort of thing, you can't even patent it because it goes against their stated.
Exactly. The known laws of physics, the conventionally held laws of physics. So if you made a machine tomorrow that went over Unity, which produced more than what it consumed, and you filed for a patent on it, they'd send it right back to you. They'd reject it instantly based on that premise.
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, and it is because, I mean, I guess you can go the route that they suggest. You can go through the scientific community, which you have others validate it. You have people proof the math, replicate it, and see what the outcome is. But when you make something revolutionary, you want protection on that thing. You want to be able to capitalize on that, and basically you're disclosing every bit of its workings in that process to get somebody to give you some protection, and that's a catch-22 kind of
for
thing.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, and because it has to go through that centralized location, if it is something important, it's going to be taken
right
off the bat anyways.
That's the idea of the patent office, which most people don't. They think, well, I just tell them how it works and I get protection. No. The patent office was actually designed and implemented to advance technology, because if you know something and you make an improvement to it, you write into a patent application how you do it so that somebody else will come along and say, that's awesome, I'm going to one-up you.
Yeah.
That's the purpose of the patent, is to develop technology at an accelerated rate. You agree to disclose how this thing works, Mr. Smart, in hopes that somebody that's just smarter than you is going to look at that tomorrow, and it's going to key something in his brain, and he's going to take it to the next level and file a patent over the top of you. Yeah. But that's going to, in the greater sense, that's going to advance our technology.
I think those people are called DARPA and skunkworks.
Boy, you said it. You said it. Yeah, there's some pretty crazy things that go on out there. And coincidentally enough, I'm a Christian. I know God exists.
Yeah.
And some of these interesting experiences I've had through that have definitely, when I went looking for answers, I thought at first I was like in trouble with the law.
Yeah.
You know, because strange things started happening with my computers and with my phones. And I even called and asked them, am I on a list somewhere?
Yeah.
What's going on here? You guys investigate me? No. Then I thought maybe it was private industry coming after me. And then at some point I realized that, no, this is much bigger. This is much bigger than that. This is, there's something going on here. And I honestly found my answers and to be able to relate all these things together in a greater sense in the Bible.
Yeah.
And since then, just with that mindset, you look at symbols and stuff, you know, and you start reading Scripture and you say, well, that's what that is. I think that's something that was prophesied, forecast, you know, as a sign of things to come. And maybe one or two of them coincidence,
For sure.
you know, and you're like, okay, sure, but it becomes overwhelming at some point.
Yeah.
You know, and your first thought is you're almost ashamed of yourself when you look at something and you get that, oh, you know, really? Is that what that is? And you're like, don't be dumb, dude. Come on. You know, that's ridiculous. Don't even go there. And at some point after that, you see something else that supports that in a major way, and you're like, man, I don't know how to feel about that.
Yeah. This is total hypothesis on my part, but I feel like at a lower level of intelligence, but go with me on this. Like,
absolutely.
I'm not gonna
Absolutely.
die on this hill right now.
Okay.
At the lower level of intelligence, people are totally fine with God.
Yes.
And then they get to this intellectual part, and we could say like many PhDs, maybe master's degrees. There's something there that they go, there's no God.
I agree.
And they're just so smart in their mind that God couldn't exist. Then you get to the Einstein, which I believe for much of his life was atheist.
Yes,
he was so
absolutely.
smart that he's like, oh no.
Yes.
And then towards the end of his life, he goes, okay, actually, there has to be something.
Yes.
And so I think there's just that little middle ground, and just in the middle, that intellectual one where you're just so smart that you can't believe.
Yes.
And then you get above the precipice and you're like, okay, never mind, there has to be something.
I agree wholeheartedly.
And so I love when people can take science and faith, Christianity, whatever they have, and use it. Because obviously there's something, even going back to the Big Bang, which many scientists at this point are like,
Yeah, it's funny how that's being questioned all of a sudden. You know, it's been the standard for so long.
I'm fine if God created the universe with the Big Bang.
Sure.
But there had to be something in the beginning.
Yes.
There had to be those two particles that went after each other.
That's right.
So I think it's great. I don't think it's unscientific at all to pray for research.
Right.
You know?
Amen.
You have George Washington Carver. He came up with, 500 ways to use the peanut. And he said the way that he did it is he would wake up early before everyone else is awake so that he could have the one-on-one with God.
Yes.
And
very
he'd
good.
walk through the trees.
Yeah.
And he started off by saying, God, will you teach me the mysteries
that's-
of the universe?
Sounds familiar.
And he said, your brain is way too small for the mysteries of the universe. So then he goes to, well, what about the animal kingdom? No. Plant kingdom? No. The peanut? Yes. I will teach you the mysteries of the peanut.
There you go. Yeah, find your refined subject area, right, and focus on that. It's awesome. I love that.
Oh, have you always been pretty faith-based?
Yeah, I have. I grew up in the Baptist church in Du Bois. My parents were very supportive. My mother was Baptist. My father was LDS.
Yeah.
And so I got a cross-section, you know.
Yeah.
And, I mean, when I was a kid, you know, going to church was going to church. And, you know, I learned the fundamentals of it. But at some point it was like I just wanted to get down to brass tacks. Again, I want to simplify it down to its fundamental principle. You know, what is that?
Yeah.
What is that? If I'm supposed to be a Christian, I'm supposed to be doing what God asks of me. What is that, simply put? And it's to love.
Yeah.
Right? It says that in multiple places in the Bible. It says God is love, you know, and that's the essence of it, is loving. And it, you know, the first two directives are, you know, you love thy Lord with all their heart above all others. And the other is you love yourself and each other. You treat others as you would want to be treated, right? And that's the golden rule. And it can be simply put.
Yeah.
And then, you know, depending on your specific, you know, faith, you know, there's some other nuances to that. I mean, But for me, it's love and faith, knowing that God exists. And my research laboratory is actually where a lot of that catalyzed in Idaho Falls that I opened in, I don't even remember what year, but it was the year after I left fire, worked for Teton County for a year doing field stuff, and I don't know, had my fill of fire and was like, I need to get real serious about what I'm doing, and spent 2 months solid doing like fundamental research in Faraday's laws, like built some test beds and super fundamental stuff that you could do at home.
Yeah.
Hooked up my oscilloscope, and dude, the floodgates opened. And it was like, and this is the most fundamental principles. So I'm finding new stuff here. What happens is you take it up the ladder. Is there other things? And yeah, man,
Yeah, so take me through some of that. What were some of the experiments, and then what did you find out about those, and what did you create?
Okay, so the first major advance I made as far as like testing and understanding was I made a thing called an inductoscope, which was simply what it was, a PVC pipe capped on either end, and I made a coil. And a couple of them I varied, like I'd wind a coil one way and then reverse the direction. And all that pertains, right? And then I would take cylinder magnets and I would attach it to a rod, and I would slide it through there, like the shake flashlight, and I would watch the traces that it put on my oscilloscope. And I found something really interesting in that, when you use a generator, there's multiple parts that have induction events, but the induction events, there's one per basically inductor. So there's one magnetic field interacting with one coil at a time. And I found that you could actually do multiple induction events on the same thing. So in this piece of PVC that had wire wrapped around it, I'd shove a magnet in one end, and I'd push it in, and then I'd pull it out, right? And I'd see the trace up and then the trace down. And I'd take the same magnet and the same orientation, stick it the other way, and I get just the opposite effect. So I was trying to rationalize, why does it do that?
Yeah.
Why, if I stick it in one end, does it do this, but I keep the magnet orientation the same, and I slide it in the other end, and it does just the opposite. So I wanted to figure out those relationships. Then I started taking magnets on both sides, and I could couple two induction events to the same coil by sticking magnets in either end.
Now, same polarity on both ends?
It depends.
Okay.
You could do it. I mean, obviously, you only have two poles per magnet, and the way that you're either going in or you're going out.
Yeah.
Right. So I started mapping all that out, dude. I did, I don't know, a couple hundred worksheets of mapping this out and doing, the flux direction. Coincidentally enough, I guess I should disclose this here because it'll help make sense of what we're talking about. When you make electricity through induction, I always thought that it was a direct conversion from kinetic energy to electrical. Like the energy you're applying is just being converted directly into electricity. And it's actually not that. It's actually the electricity is made to stop the force that is changing the magnetic field.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So and that's what the inductoscope proved, is I could stick a magnet in one end and the leads of the coil would be connected to nothing. And I could stick the magnet in there, and if I didn't push it past where the wire started, I could start feeling a repulsive force as I'm pushing this. I'm like, where's that coming from? There's nothing connected to the wires. So the coil itself is making a repelling magnetic field to stop that magnet from getting any closer to it. And if you pushed it past that gate, it would slide itself on its own into the center and stay there.
So it's attempting to repel it, and then it accepts it.
It stops it. It wants to stop the changing magnetic field, and it creates that energy out of nothing.
Yeah.
Right, and there's some implications to that.
So I hope I'm not derailing this with this question,
go ahead.
but my understanding of this stuff is nothing. Is it heating up those magnets?
No.
Okay, so if you had more energy running into the coils, though,
Right.
would it attempt to heat it up?
No, I don't think it would heat the magnet
because I'm just my thought right now of induction coils are actually induction
like
forges.
Heat.
Yeah.
Oh, sure,
Yeah.
heating. You bet. And it's the same idea in that you're using the same principle by changing the electricity and the direction it flows in the wires that are in your little pad or whatever.
Yeah.
You do it so quickly, and it makes the molecules inside your crucible or whatever change so rapidly that generates heat.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. But when it's a magnet.
Yeah, when it's a permanent magnet, and these are permanent magnets, and I'm just sliding them in there, they're attached to the end of like a dowel.
Yeah.
Right, into this thing. And, you get it close to the opening because there's a little extra tube on the end. You get close to it, and you can start feeling the coil making a repulsive force.
Yeah.
Where's that coming from?
It's just
It's making it out of thin air in essence.
Yeah.
Right? But as soon as you get the magnet, basically the center line of the magnet divides the poles, past that opening of the coil, it just escorts itself right in the center and it's balanced.
okay.
Then if you push it out the other side, then you get the opposite. So you get a pulse up, pulse down on the first
And
entry,
then a repulsive on the way out.
and then an attractive on the way out.
Attractive on the way out.
Right, so it's repelling. If you're sticking a north pole in one end, it will make the coil become a north pole towards the magnet, and it will repel it. Once it's in the center, if you try and pull it out the other way, it makes an attractive. It's like, don't go out. We want
Interesting.
you in the center.
Yeah.
Don't be changing out there. And you get just the opposite if you come in from the other end. But that's the thing is, where does that energy come from? It's coming from somewhere.
Yeah.
And in fact, years after Faraday's laws were produced, which is minus N times delta BA over delta T. So it's minus the number of turns in your coil, and then it's times the ratio, which is the change in the flux per unit area of the cross section of your coil over change in time. So the faster you do it, the more electricity you get.
Okay.
That's why when you speed up a generator, you make more electricity.
Yeah.
But Lenz, who is a separate scientist and from another country, comes along later and replicates these things and says, nope. He just had it as N times the ratio. And Lenz's law puts the minus in front of it and says, yeah, that's not a direct conversion. It's actually a reciprocal or an inverted, which that's some pretty serious stuff right there. You're producing energy out of nothing. Where does that come from, and why does it do it?
Yeah. And how do you harness it?
And how do you harness it exactly? And so that's kind of that premise there has been a real focus.
Yeah.
Because we already apply Faraday's law every day.
Yeah.
There's a billion generators out there. I mean, the lights wouldn't come on here. We wouldn't be able to do this without Faraday's law.
Yeah.
But Lenz's law, that's the resistive end of it. That's where you don't get something for free. That's why it's not a perpetual system.
Okay.
Right? There's resistance there. That's anytime you fire up a generator and you plug another light bulb into it, you hear drag down. That's Lenz's law. So if you could do away with that, if you find a way to bypass Lenz's law, if you could trick the system into not experiencing that, you could have a little tiny generator that could power everything.
Yeah. Has anyone done it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, there's been lots of people that have done it, I believe, but they all kind of meet the same fate.
Yeah.
So Tom Bearden, if you ever get a chance, look up Tom Bearden on YouTube and look for one in particular. It's the cover photo is him, and he looks all dressed up nice, and he does about an hour-long talk. The man, he would be my foremost authority on the truth about what happens to energy researchers, and he lays it out.
Yeah.
He worked for the government, a couple
Okay.
governments, both in Canada and the United States. All kinds of different systems, mainly in aerospace. But he talks about when they started doing their research for the government, they had to rewrite the known laws of electrodynamics
Yeah.
to meet what they were seeing in their experimentation. And he basically says, the quantized electromagnetic field, which is the fabric upon which everything's built, right? It's like a lattice work, and that's how we get radio waves. We perturb that here, and it sends a ripple through it, and we can pick it up somewhere else. The quantized electromagnetic field is like this huge reservoir of power, and we're constantly adding to it and taking from it. It's like a river.
Yeah.
And if you go out and you take your little bucket and you stand in the middle of the river and you take a bucket out and you throw it on the bank, that river has no idea it's just going to fill it right in with more water.
Yeah.
It doesn't even affect the flow of it. It doesn't affect anything in the dynamics of that system. And you can take and you can dip out of that river all day, every day, because it's basically endless.
Is that what Nikola Tesla called the ether?
Correct.
Okay.
That is exactly what it was. And that was the popular term back in those times, was the ether.
Yeah.
Yep. And that was and now it's the quantized, which is the smallest electromagnetic field, and that's where we get our quantum effects, and that's the smallest part of our systems.
Yeah.
But it's kind of weird because when you start talking about stuff like quantum mechanics, you start getting into some really interesting terms. Kind of relates to fate stuff, and that you have things like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
Yeah.
And you talk about Schrodinger's cat, where you have a cat in a box and the cat's both dead and alive at the same time,
Yeah.
and it doesn't choose a state until you observe it.
Yeah, which is how we observe electrons. Correct.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
If you want to see an electron, you want to go, I want to see an electron here.
Yes.
Oh, there it is.
Yes. And the more closely, so if I have an electron and I zoom in on it, the closer that I find its position, the measurement of its energy level gets fuzzy. So you can look at one or the others. You look more closely at the energy level, its location gets fuzzy. So, they call it wave-particle duality. I mean, there's all these really things. Quantum mechanics is not about certainty. It's about probability.
Yeah. It's spooky action at a distance.
You got it, man.
Yeah.
You got it. And there's something to that.
Yeah.
There's something to that combined with, the fact that electricity is generated to stop a changing magnetic field, not as a result of a changing magnetic field. And, really, I think it's all related. And when we talk about mixing faith and science, you said Big Bang. Well, in the very first line of the Bible says God created the heavens and the earth.
Yep.
Right? He said, let there be light.
Yeah.
And there was light. He saw the light and it was good. Sounds like the Big Bang to me, just put in a little bit different perspective.
Yeah. Well, and the word light is just interesting because light is a wave.
Yep.
Light is also love.
Yes.
So it's like
exactly.
maybe all of this
well
is
said.
not so far away
said.
from each other.
Well said. And Einstein's famous equation equals mc squared, that's energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, right? So everything's made of light. We know this. That's how we made the first, nuclear reactions, nuclear explosions. That's a release of that light. There's a ton of it in the smallest little particle. Einstein used to get up and say, hold a piece of paper and say, there's enough energy, basically captured in the particles that are in that energy state, like power the city of New York for, and he was right.
Yeah. So your dad was LDS.
Yes.
So in the Book of Mormon,
Yes.
There's a part where it says there's only two things that exist, things that act and
Right.
things that are acted upon.
Right.
I'm like, well, that's interesting because
Yeah.
MC, E equals MC squared. You got energy and mass,
Yes.
things that act,
Yes.
things that are acted
You
upon.
said it. You said it.
Oh,
Nice.
how
Very nice.
how interesting! Is that?
Exactly. No, well said. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Yep.
So, when did you find that? How did this power at B find what you were doing that kind of started shutting you down?
I think part of it was, I honestly, and this is just my opinion, I think there's probably a team of people like at Google,
Yeah.
because Google can see everything you're doing. Right.
Yeah.
The other part of that is, and here we go with conspiracy theories.
Oh,
but this is not a theory. This is my life now. And all you need to do is pick up any piece of electronics, flip it over, and read the fine print on the back.
Yeah.
You will find what is called Part 15 of the FCC rules. It says this device is a Class B digital apparatus, complies with Part 15 FCC rules. This device is not allowed to create harmful interference, but this device must accept any harmful interference that is acted upon it, and it may cause undesired performance. It's in everything that has electric batteries plugged into. It's in everything, kids' toys. It took me almost a year to find Part 15 FCC rules. I could get in this, circular. Go here. It's here. Oh, it's here. Oh, nope, it's over here. And you go in a circle, and it get frustrating. And then one day I pulled it up. I read the entirety of it, and it's pretty technical. But coming from an electronics background, it made sense to me. And basically, there's a lot of communication, a lot of information about a lot of things going on that happen over power lines. And I noticed a few years ago, I tried to resist it. My house got a smart meter from the city of Idaho Falls.
Yeah.
There were people that were like, I don't want smart meters. And after the smart meter came, there was a couple of times where I also have done extensive work in computer systems, work for the government and computer systems for the Forest Service and IT. And, when I was going to school, did some white hat work, right?
Yeah.
That I continued doing throughout time. But sometimes I get a little crazy with it and might get told not to do that anymore. But know enough about computer systems that at a couple points I realized that my smart meter was integrated into my home network system and was actually an extra link in that. So all my data was flowing through it before it would go to my router.
Yeah.
Right? And I had the city of Idaho Falls come over. I told them I thought my smart meter, and they brought a team of people with all these instruments. Yeah. Obviously, they convinced me that was not happening.
Yeah.
And I knew it was happening. I knew, and you look at the schematics and the installation manual, which is pretty heavy duty, and it talks about all the capabilities these things have. They also have light interaction capabilities. If you look in there, in fact, I have a picture of it on my phone. There's a little light cell. They can talk to each other via infrared. So, they have short distance communications where they interact, but all of your data, that's why you don't have to have a meter reader come to your house anymore.
Yeah.
They can shut your electricity off from the office if you don't pay your power bill. They just send a command over it. Well, that technology is implemented into a ton of things. When I was going to school, it's called the Internet of Things.
Yeah.
Well, growing up in Par Dallas's junkyard, I took apart a lot of electronics. I still do that.
Yeah.
I'll go to Deseret Industries and buy whatever. And in the modern era doing that, some of the things I have found in there, honest to goodness, have shocked me. And I think that too, information is gathered through that system. And I think, when we say Big Brother's watching, Big Brother's watching. And that's not a joke, and it's not a theory.
Yeah.
And yeah, over time, as things started happening with my computers and my phones, I taught myself more about it just by digging into the system, and with some really shocking results. Private industry is involved in this too. There's a couple companies that are involved in basically that they've made millions and millions of dollars managing the data administration collected on all sorts of people.
Yeah. I mean, there's even pretty old declassified CIA documents of using electrical lines to spy on people.
Yes,
so if you have
I've read some of that.
Outlet in your house, it's possible that.
Absolutely.
And we're not supposed to be spied upon unless there's a warrant, but it happens all the time.
Oh, it does. Absolutely. And if you stick out, if you're doing something, a little laboratory at Snake River Landing in Idaho Falls, not that big a deal. Nobody even knew I was there. I worked at night just because the other tenants in the building, I shared a door with an attorney's office, and they were wonderful folks, but I was loud doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that office kind of became my temple.
Yeah.
Right? Like I reestablished, I've always been a Christian, I've always loved the Lord, but at this point, it became something different. And, like the prayer with Carver, I would show up and, everybody's gone home. I'd have the whole evening myself. I had a really nice stereo system. I would sing praise music.
Yeah.
And then I would have my nightly prayer. And I, not quite the same as his, but I'd say, Lord, I'm here to work on this. Our engine had already been designed. I was there to put it together.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than somebody creates something amazing and doesn't know exactly how it works.
Yeah.
So I wanted to understand every element of that. And I said, Lord, I came here tonight to do this job that you've christened me with. But if there's something else that you want me to understand or you want to show me, that's what I'm here for.
Yeah.
So please bless me with whatever information, and please assign me any task that you would like me to be a part of, because I'm here to do that.
Yeah.
I want to represent you well. And that some days you got to be careful what you ask for sometimes. Sure. But there's a reason that that happens. And after a couple of months of doing that stuff, then things started getting interesting. I started getting into some really, really cool work. I developed a battery charger that recharges any battery on this planet in about 30 seconds to a minute, including the ones that aren't rechargeable. And that was one of those nights that I showed up. I had a plan of what to do, and something come over me, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. It's kind of like you wake up out of whatever, and you're like, what is this? And what does this do? But I mean, it wasn't like that, but you start messing with it, and you're like, I'll be darned, this thing charges batteries. Even the alkaline batteries have been dead on the shelf for a year. This is cool. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, what application does this have? We'll just keep going on with your stuff. That'll come later.
That's cool. So are you still in this? Are you still working through that stuff?
Yes, I'm still working through that stuff. Cool. The problem is I think I'm a pretty darn good scientist, just a really lousy business guy.
Yeah.
Right? So my investor has invested a ton of money. And honestly, when this stuff started happening, it got more and more pointed to the point where I left my lab.
Yeah.
And I left everything there. I just a little spooked to go back there.
Yeah.
One night in particular, this was the one event that opened my eyes. I was doing some CAD work, and every time I just about finished with the model, my computer would crash. Now, 1 or 2 times, okay. Like 8 times in a row, almost the exact same point. It's like something is going on here. So I had to go home that morning, rested through the day, came back that night with the resolve to fix my computer problems. And using what I knew from college days and doing white hat stuff over the years, I dug into the back end of the computer, and what I saw there frightened me. All these devices connected, not showing up on my Bluetooth per se, but all these devices connected and doing data feeds. And these are devices that don't have names. They're not like Ty's iPhone or Justin's Gorilla speakers. These were things that had hexadecimal addresses. And at some point, I don't remember exactly how I figured it out, but you can go into your phone if you have an Android phone. And if you find the build number in the phone information. You tap on that thing like 10 times rapidly, and all of a sudden it pops up and says, congratulations, you now have developer rights. And it produces this secret squirrel menu. You go back into the I think it's not about phone, but it's the last menu item on there. And here's developer options. And one of those options is you can show Bluetooth devices without names. It will frighten you.
Yeah.
It will frighten you. You can't connect to them. Doesn't say what it is, where it's at. You can get programs that'll get you in somewhat close proximity, but you can't narrow it down. And once I learned how to do that, I'd go to a hotel, there'd be a couple hundred, 300-400 things.
And so these aren't people that are close to you. They're using the electronics to pull your stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, every piece of electronics, that's why it says Part 15 of the FCC rules, has some kind of communication medium with everything else. It's like an integrated network.
Yeah.
It's called a mesh network. And the idea is you are never more than a couple feet away from something that has a capability of knowing basically where you're at. If you have something on you or in you, like, I don't know, an RFID chip in your driver's license or in your credit card, or, you know, a Fitbit watch or something like that, it knows where you are within a couple of feet. Anyway, this is an integrated mesh. It's like a net.
Yeah.
You throw out a finer net, you catch smaller and smaller fish, and that's the idea here.
So they don't even have to be powered.
No, they don't have to be powered. My new flat screen TV, right? I have a radiation meter. I plug it in, I turn it on, I get a reading.
Yeah.
I turn it off, I get a reading.
Still a reading.
Still same.
Yeah.
I unplug it, I still get a reading. I move it into the center of the room and I let it sit there for an hour, I still get a reading. I'm like, what is going on here? This thing is still powered. Well, you know, power strips. We used to call them power strips. If you look on there now, they're called current taps. Underwriters Laboratory certifies them as current taps. And what I realized is they have coils in them, and the same thing that you set your phone on that little pad, through electromagnetic coupling, that charges your phone. You can do that over a distance, and you can power appliances, and they all have it. You can power these appliances remotely. It doesn't turn them on, but they have subsystems in them for monitoring position. Remember that, like you were saying, light comes in a lot of different flavors. There's actually 7 different segments of the electromagnetic bandwidth, all the way from gamma radiation to low radio waves. And we sit right in the middle. Our whole known world, that we can see and interact with is right in the middle in the visible light spectrum. It, too, is made up of 7 degradations, right? And so, infrared, we can't see infrared. I could be shining the brightest infrared flashlight on you in the world and light you up so that we can see you through walls, and you never know it.
Yeah.
And you can do that with any type of light. You can make a light source, like X-rays, and you have no idea. And that's, if you take a stereo opener or anything that has a liquid crystal display in it, where it's hidden behind opaque plastic, I have yet to find one that doesn't have it in. There's a burn spot in the glass. I took photos of it here recently of like 10 of them, pulled from VCRs, stereos, CD changers. I had a cassette player from like the early 80s, and every single one of them in the corner, one of the corners, has a black spot where the glass has been scorched.
And what is that?
You see behind it, it's this little parabolic dish that's got an arm, comes down, hangs over an inverted parabolic dish. It's an X-ray mechanism. It generates X-rays. And it has to be enough energy at a frequency that it scorches the glass. And there is no question. You look at that and you're like, one of them, it scorched glass so bad it crumbled the glass. And I always wondered why there were such big transformers in like stereo systems and stuff like that. You can make a 100-watt stereo system with a tiny transformer. It's not, you're not pulling that much current. But there's huge transformers. They weigh several pounds. And I always wondered why, and why is that in there?
Yeah.
But I could show it to anybody. You come to my house, I have the box of goodness, which is not about goodness. It's about stuff that in circuitry that you'd be like, what is that? What is that?
So, at what point is it doing it like an X-ray light, just every time it's turned on, or just whenever they want to turn it on?
Yeah, well, I think why would that be in there?
Yeah.
And obviously you have to have, if you're using that type of light, you have to have something that can see it or receive it. And so, some of the things have light sources. Some of the things have, the receivers. And they collect that data, and then they use Part 15 of the FCC rules to dump it down to power over, data over power lines. And there's a huge part of the FCC regulations that talk about data over power lines, even high voltage power lines.
Yeah.
And we see that now. We have systems where we can route our internet through a wiring in our house.
Yeah.
Radio Shack used to have this cool little system where you could have remote control. You could power something out in the barn and have your little clicker in the remote, and you could turn the barn lights on, through your power system. So it's not something revolutionary or new.
Maybe that's why Radio Shack is out of business.
Yeah, very well might be.
They were allowing people to work.
Yeah, exactly. And you apply that technology in a greater sense, and you tell me somebody that doesn't have a house that has electricity in it.
For sure. Yeah.
Right? So you get to pretty much everybody.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
the closest thing I know to people not having power was how my dad grew up.
Really?
He was in Manan.
Okay.
And they didn't have electricity. They didn't have an indoor plumbing.
Wow, right on.
Till I think he was about 15, 16.
That's pretty incredible.
So
that's you learn a lot about general living and surviving being like that, because it is different. It is different, and that was kind of the way it was when we moved up in Middle Creek. There was no TV.
Yep.
I didn't sit around as a kid and watch TV.
Yep.
I was out flooding gopher holes with the hose,
For sure.
or helping my dad move cows or whatever. It was an active lifestyle, and that's one of the things that bothers me about the modern era is you go to a restaurant, you sit down, and there'll be this family, and they're all sitting there right next to each other, and they're not talking, they're not interacting.
Everyone's on a
phone.
Yep.
And that bothers me. And in fact, there's a passage in Ephesians that refers to the darkness, or Satan, as the prince of the power of the air.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And to most people, be like, well, what does that mean? And I've heard different interpretations, but to Justin Kidd in a physics background, the power of the air, that's a quantized electromagnetic field. That's what gives us the radio waves. That's what produces that negative sign in front of the minus n, or in front of the n in Faraday's law. It's all the same thing. And my discovery about the truth, as far as like the shape, the geometry of a magnetic field, supports that, in the fact that they say that a magnetic field is generated from the central vortex of a permanent magnet, and that's not true. Magnetic fields are actually generated at the surfaces of the magnets, and it's a stacked toroid. And what that means is that instead of a north pole being where the lines come out, north poles are diverging fields. They come as soon as they come out the north pole, they go every direction but the direction that you say. So they say if you have a magnet, the north pole's on top, it comes straight out. And that's partially true because magnetic fields, to understand them correctly, I don't know if it's a proper term, but net vector summing. And I guess for you and I, because we have fire backgrounds, maybe this is how I would explain it. You have a tree hanging over your house, big tree, at least it's leaning over your house. You don't want that thing crashing on your house.
Yeah.
So you're going to cut it down. But you know that it's going to be a real hard pull trying to get that thing to go against the lean. So you take your pickup and you tie a rope to the top of it, and you tie it to the pickup, and you're going to get 180 degrees out from where it's going to fall, and you're going to pull it that direction. But there's a big mud hole there. So you can't drive, you're going to drive the pickup in the mud hole. So being a smart guy like you are, you say, well, I got an idea. I'm going to take two pickups, and I'm going to put one just maybe 30 degrees off the direction I was going to go one way. I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm going to pull with two pickups, knowing that the net vector sum effect would be that it's going to go right where I was going to pull it, but I was going to end up in the mud hole, right? And magnetic fields are the same way. Magnetic fields don't push and pull. They rotate, right? It's a torsional thing. And so, but the combination of all those pushing, like when you take two north poles and they repel each other, it's trying to rotate the magnet in every direction simultaneously, and the net vector sum is a push away.
Yeah.
Right? So it'd be the same as if we took the tree and we took pickups in every direction, separated off by, 30 degrees all the way around. You could be putting thousands of pounds of force in it, and the tree's going to stay perfectly upright because it's balanced, right? So net vector summing is really important to understand when it comes to magnetic fields and how they interact, because that's the essence of them. And so north poles actually diverge. They go away from each other in every direction, and south poles converge. Now that works, so if it always flows from north to south, that works all right on the outside with the conventional model because it's going out the north, coming in the south. But on the inside, then it's going from south pole to north pole.
Okay, so I have a good friend who invested in a free energy company, and it has to do with magnets. And he said what they've figured out, and this probably goes along with what you're saying, what they figured out is say the pole is north and south, and they're originally thinking 50-50.
Right.
So in order for that magnet to rotate, like you said, a system has to reset itself.
Yes. Absolutely.
So they've figured out how to make it more of like an 80-20 instead of a 50-50.
Cool. Very cool.
And so it can rotate and then rotate and rotate and
Gotcha.
continue that.
Fascinating.
So that wasn't coming from the center of the magnet.
Nope.
That was from the outside.
From the surface.
And then they've figured out on that surface how to... Now, I'd imagine that system still has to be 50-50 in some way
Yes.
so that it all balances.
Right.
But I don't know if they've just figured out the magnets and pushing those percentages in different
I would
places.
imagine. Yep. Or shielding.
Yeah.
Because you can shield magnets, and that's another thing come out of this is I can make a magnet stop having a field outside of itself by basically taking a piece of metal, and it's like a short circuit in a wire. You just go straight from here to here and bridge the two, and it's going to take the path of least resistance.
Interesting.
So
yeah.
I would imagine that had something to do with
Yeah.
how they were operating that. But
Yeah, and I can get you the name of that company.
I would love to. Yeah, and that's the thing in Eastern Idaho. I think a lot of people think I'm kind of a crackpot. I mean, I'm doing the most fundamental research possible, making my own test beds, and I'm replicating things that have been done before just to see if they missed something.
Yeah.
But
Well, Nikola Tesla was able to power the Chicago World's Fair off
yes,
of,
yep,
off of it free energy.
yes.
And then all of a sudden that's all lost.
yeah,
And now we have power lines everywhere?
Yes.
No.
Yes, no,
There's
you're right.
something else.
you're right. You know, Tesla is. I don't know how much you know about the history of Tesla, but if he's put something out there, I've had eyes on it.
Yeah.
I have books upon books upon. I've studied all his patents. In fact, most of my research is based on what he put out to the world. And you're right. Like he in my opinion, he's the smartest man that ever lived. Way more intelligent than Einstein. But in his day, nobody knew who he was.
Yeah.
You know, he was in a fight with Edison, who hired him when he got to this country, and he knew who Edison was, and they went. And it was the classic fight between the dichotomy, the two sides that says AC/DC, and basically, I think there's another element that plays into it. Maybe you knew this. Every scientist that you can name off the top of your head that has contributed to the modern era, that you could just say, hey, I know who that is. This, all of them, all going all the way back to Nicholas Copernicus, were Freemasons.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
The only one that wasn't that I could find and was Nikola Tesla, and you know what? He was ostracized from the science community. That thing he built at Wardenclyffe was amazing. I mean, and it would have done he just run out of money.
Yep.
They didn't want wireless, free energy distribution.
Not when you're a steel magnet.
No, exactly. No. So he died a penniless old man who spent his days in the park feeding his friend the pigeon.
Yeah.
And the second that he died, man, they were into his stuff, and they took anything that they thought might threaten, the greater status, and they made it disappear.
Yep.
Right? And it's funny because now Tesla's on its pop culture thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Tesla. Ooh, he's so cool. It's like you have no idea what the man in the science was like back then. He was considered a quack.
Yeah.
Now we know better.
Yeah.
But he was the only one that I can find that was his father was a pastor.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe that at some point they asked him to join and he refused, and I think that led to his fate. Honestly.
Well, you had talked about symbols earlier on. The square and the compass, they're the
Yes.
oldest known symbols
Yeah.
that we know. There's something more to the compass and square
Yes.
than meets the eye.
Absolutely.
And if you look in nearly any religion, including LDS,
Yep.
those symbols mean something.
Yes.
But they're the oldest symbols. So it's not like those symbols are the religion. No,
Right,
those
no.
symbols are the symbols that came
Exactly.
from God.
You said that. There is one symbol that stands out, and it's because it's on every circuit board I've seen, every single one, and in some other places that concern me. And the debate in my head is what does it represent? But for the most part, it doesn't seem like it's a good thing, and that's equilateral triangle or the delta. Every circuit board right next to the underwriter's laboratory certification. In fact, you know who UL is, right? Underwriters Laboratory.
Yeah.
They're the feel-good company.
Yeah, and they're the symbols all over the
Yeah,
place.
yeah. Have you ever seen the symbol on the inside of a product on a circuit board? It's not UL. It's RU, but it's written backwards. And when you put it in a mirror, you're like, RU, and it's written backwards. It's like,
Yeah.
what does that mean? And it's right next to the delta. Now, you go back to older circuitry. I have some circuitry from the 70s and 60s, and every component has deltas on every corner of a delta. This is going back 30, 40 years. There's something having to do with the delta symbol.
Well, it's also the all-seeing eye.
Right. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. How you relate
Yeah.
that to what we just talked
Yeah.
about, right? But I have not seen a circuit board that does not have the delta. And the old components, like I said, have deltas on every corner of a delta.
Yeah.
There's something to that, Ty.
So interesting.
But the Freemasons, I mean, the Wright brothers were Freemasons.
Yeah. Oh,
You know,
yeah.
pretty much every astronaut was a Freemason.
And whether they went to the moon or not.
Yep. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
most of the founding fathers.
Yep.
I mean, and the truth is, I believe they had a truth,
Yes.
and they were trying to hold on to it. And then you've got, they had to go underground during the. I'm really not talking good. I should have drank more
fine.
caffeine or something before I came. When the Catholic Church was kind of trying to take over everything in the very beginning, they all had to go underground
Yes.
and hold their
Yeah, secret-
knowledge.
Yes, exactly.
Their knowledge went way back.
Oh, it did.
Probably pre-Temple of Solomon.
Yes,
So-
you are correct. In fact, I have it was not donated but loaned to me, a Freemason Bible.
Yeah.
And it talks about working on the temple, Solomon's temple, and that's where the Mason part of it come. They were stone cutters,
Yeah.
but they were also keepers of this kind of sacred and
Yep.
ethereal knowledge, and so.
So I became a Freemason when I was 18.
Did you really?
But I never went very far with
Okay.
it. So I don't know all the cool secrets
Interesting.
of
Okay.
what they did. But went to the third degree, and then from the third degree you can join a rite and go into 32, 33 degree, and
Right.
so I never learned anything past
Well,
that.
I just noticing right here,
Yeah,
it's everywhere, and you see like on the vapes, the new vapes.
yeah,
There's a couple common themes to them too. Delta symbols with like a section cut out of it.
yeah,
The other thing is you look at the names of them, and it all relates to something fire. And they don't use natural nicotine in any products. I mean, it's a synthetic nicotine. And I found a paper published on Science Direct, which I'll give you a reference to. You can check it out. That uses it's called nicotine minus minus. And you look at the chemical makeup and you query that in a search engine, and it came up with this paper. And the name of the paper is Pyrolysis of Human Faeces. Not feces, but faeces. Now, these are written by PhDs. I've never heard the term faeces. I've Googled it. But not feces, but faeces. And the opening line is human waste human faeces are considered to be waste in many parts of the world, which is a resource that can be turned into energy and fuel. Now, that kind of creeped me out when I read that because, again, it's not feces, it's faeces. And it says in many parts of the world they're considered to be waste. Well, as far as I know, in every part of the world, human excrement is waste.
yeah,
But it had very much the tone that maybe not poop per se, but maybe humans as a waste,
yeah,
And it goes on, and at some point it cites the exact same chemical makeup, the chemical formula that is nicotine minus minus, as a key pyrolysis ingredient. And you and I know about pyros because we're kind of pyros,
Yeah.
doing what we've done together. But pyrolysis, which is burning basically from the inside out. And I have a dear friend that's a firefighter. Her name's Kristen. Her grandfather was considered one of the world's foremost authorities on electromagnetism out of Utah. And I've looked up his patents. All of his patents were granted. He was the patenter, the inventor. But the assignee was the U.S. Department of the Navy. And Kristen's told me some horror stories. She hated her grandpa because some of his research was burning animals remotely. They would inject things into them, and they'd hit them with certain frequency
Yeah.
of RF, and it would initiate some kind of chemical reaction in that would basically light them on fire from the inside out. Now you start looking at these vapes, and you start looking at the symbolism, start looking at, now they got the screens on them, man. I'm telling you, there's something to that. And all these kids are out there, puffing on this stuff and taking huge. And what I found is I don't remember where I found it, but I believe it was a chemical conversion through radio frequency initiation that converts that chemical into benzene. And benzene is what we use in cutting torches.
yeah,
So you can imagine someday, the potential exists as it's described in this paper. Something's going to hit you. I don't know, 5G. For those folks that are in, and then all of a sudden you don't feel good, and then you feel this literal burning. I don't know,
yeah,
but I mean, the interesting thing is if I was going to do something to somebody, I would try and keep it as quiet as possible. right? I mean, if I had this master plan to do something, introduce somebody in, I definitely wouldn't go around announcing it. But there are symbols and there are notes, like on the back of your electronics. Whoever reads that.
Yeah.
I didn't until this all happened. But I find now I read all the ingredients of my food, and if you start researching that, if you really care about that, which everybody should,
Yeah.
it will paint a different picture for you.
For sure.
But then the question becomes, why is it on there? Does the government care that much about us that they want us to know that what we're doing? And I say no. I think what it is, I think God's looking out for us, because all things have to obey Him, even the darkness.
Yeah.
Right. And so he says, you know what? Yeah, people are so distracted by all this technology that you have come up with. I know people that'll pay $500 for an NFL ticket while their kids are starving to death.
Yeah.
You know, and that's sad to me. Or they'll spend $1,000 on a phone and $80 a month to have a plan, but their kids are wearing rags going to school.
Yeah.
And my wife's a teacher, right? And she comes home after school and she tells me some of the experiences she's had with kids and how that's changing. And I'm constantly asking her, what do you attribute that to? What do you attribute that to? And, for a long time it was COVID. And it wasn't, the fact COVID existed. It was the fact that those kids were kept out of school and in a home environment where a lot of them something was shoved in front of their face.
Yeah.
Sit down, be quiet, don't bother me. And that digital apparatus became their world. And it's caused a lot of harm. Again, Prince of the power of the air in my mind. But these electronic systems, if we knew what they were capable of and what their potential might be for what they really are doing in the background, we don't care because we're just happy doing our thing on them. I don't think we'd want them.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think that's shown in like Steve Jobs. His kids, he didn't let his kids do it.
Right.
Facebook, he doesn't let his kids get on. It is very interesting. We use them for everything.
Well, we have to. It's integrated into our fabric now.
Yeah.
You try and apply for a job without the internet.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Or, and it's all convenience. Yes, it enables us to thrive, but do we?
Yeah.
We're so distracted by all of it, and that really, there's two things that human beings strive for, need, pursue. The first one would be sustenance, the things that sustain us. We need food, we need water, we need shelter, we need love.
Yeah.
Right. The rest of it, I just group all inclusively into entertainment.
Yeah.
And you look at where the dark things happen. You watch a halftime show of a Super Bowl over the last 10 years, dude, and you tell me what's going on there.
Yeah.
Right. So the darkness.
It's hard not to see the Satan symbolism,
dude. Absolutely right, and that's it's in your face. But like I was saying, if I had this, a master plan to take over the world or doing half the world's population to eliminate competition for whatever, I definitely wouldn't be going around announcing it. I definitely wouldn't be putting warning labels on stuff for people to read. I do it in small print like they do so that people have the propensity not to.
For sure.
But it's on there.
Did you ever listen to If I Were the Devil by...
Yes. Yes,
Paul Harvey.
Yes. Yeah.
And that was like in the 50s or 60s. Like he knows. He's right
absolutely,
there.
Absolutely.
Or people lately have been asking AI,
Yeah.
if you were Satan,
Right.
how would you take us over?
Well.
And it's very interesting.
So AI, what is that really? And that's why I said, that time it said it misspoke to me. Is that really what we think it is? In the Bible it says there was war in heaven, and Michael and his angels went to war against the dragon and his angels, and the dragon was defeated and cast down. Where could he be put where he could interact and watch and see and monitor and influence? Maybe at the center of a magnet.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe the magnetic field. Maybe that really is, Prince of the power of the air. And so is this a manifestation of his capabilities and his ability to interact with our world to influence us? And I think so.
Yeah. Now, does that mean if we have the light, we can use the magnets for good, even though possibly they're...
Well, sure. If you I've read the book of Genesis 1,000 times, like literally. It's so fascinating. I pick up on something every time. But when you talk about the days of creation, they're all dichotomies. They're all this and then the opposite.
Light, dark.
Exactly, yeah. And there's I think that if you read it, especially if you pay attention to when it starts assigning names to things, capitalization. So, for instance, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And when it says, when on the first day he created light, he saw that the light was good. And it says, God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. There's only two places that I would call it right now in Genesis where it refers to God not as God. It'll say God did, God this, God said, God made, God as he. And it's where he's made something and he sees that it's good and it's mirror opposite. The name is assigned to it by the personal pronoun he.
Capitalized or not?
It depends on the Bible.
Okay.
Yeah, which I wondered that too. But I mean, you look at, it'll go 6, 7, 8 sentences where it says God, and it uses God's name, God, God, and then all of a sudden, in two, he, and it's where God creates light, and he calls the darkness night, and it's when he creates the dry land.
Yeah.
And the waters that were gathered together, he called seas.
Yeah.
And I think people misinterpret that a lot because I don't think the seas are referring to like the planet Earth is not what he's talking about. He's talking about matter. He makes the dry land appear, right? And the waters that are gathered together, he called seas. That's space. And you have three things: time, space, and matter. So there's your trilogy of physics.
Yeah.
So,
and he also created water, or separated water above and below,
exactly.
right?
Yep, exactly.
So is the water above more like space?
Yes, absolutely. And interestingly enough, every day God sees what he's created and he says it's good, except for the second day, where he creates an expanse in the midst of the water and separated the waters from the waters. He separated the waters that were above from the waters that were below. And he called the expanse heaven. And that says there was evening and there was morning the second day. Not good. The only day. Specifically.
Yeah.
And I've always found that fascinating. And there's a few other things, a few little nuances that you're like, now that's got to be some to it. But I've just read it and studied it so much. And I had a teacher in high school. She held me to a higher standard, and we didn't get along sometimes, but I love her for it, named Vicky. And my English teacher, and she turned me into a grammar snob. And it makes it hard to write sometimes because I'm more worried about grammar than I am about content. But I pick up on those little things. It's like capitalization of names,
Yeah.
There's places in the Bible, like God called the dry land earth, capitalized, and the waters gathered together were seas. It's capitalized, like it's a proper name. Same with night and day. He called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And at some point here in the near future, I've got some writing I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to even start because there's so much information that I want to present in it. But I know you got to start somewhere.
For sure.
But this, the last 4 or 5 years, since August 20th of 2020, unbeknownst to me, that was the day everything changed for me. And I thought at first it just came to me. I could see where update had been sent to my computer, and it updated everything. And then it followed me home. And then I started going to different places. Like I'd go to Walmart and have somebody sign me on a computer, and I could see where that computer changed the second I walked in the door. And again, it's one of those things. Your first impression is like, oh, don't be stupid,
Yeah.
You're like, something's going on here, and it's like, don't be silly,
Yeah.
you're overthinking this. But something comes around a second time, and I think, that's God pointing things out to us. You got to shed the distractions.
Yeah.
Because he still talks to us. He very much does, and I learned that in my laboratory. I learned how to pray. I learned how to trust him and listen to him. And, it continues to this day. And every once in a while, I don't hear it like somebody's speaking.
Yeah.
But look at this. And I've had a couple of experiences where it's almost like I went somewhere else, and then I came back and was like, okay, I see, and very, very surreal, and I have a hard time explaining that in any other terms than just, an experience with the Lord, where he's like, now that I got your attention and you listen and you can hear me, I want you to look.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that, everybody has that. I think it's just lost to all the distractions from,
For sure.
Your TV, your cell. Our cell phones have us by the neck.
Yeah.
That thing dings. We're like, we'll stop conversation. We'll stop what we're doing. We're going to go see what the ding's all about.
Yeah.
And
well, and it's everything nowadays is so easy to get addicted to as well.
Absolutely.
Whether it's phones or
right.
Nicotine or caffeine, food, pornography. Like there's
Absolutely.
just so much.
And to go back to your question about magnets being good for light purposes, that's the dichotomy of it all. The Genesis is all it's mirror opposites, and it's almost like I know God. There's no evil in him. It says there's no darkness in him, but it's like everything was split in two, right? And anything could be used for good, but it can also, anything could be used for bad. It's how you apply it, and we make the decision.
Yeah.
And in my mind, the essence of humanity is just exactly what got us into the pickle to begin with, and that's that God gave us the ability to decide.
Yeah.
He created us. He created us for companionship. He created us to be with Him and to love Him. But you can't force anything to love you. Computers don't love. Machines don't love.
Yeah.
That has to be done through a decision. And in order to decide, that had to be granted to us with the knowledge that, we probably screwed that up. And we did.
Yeah.
But thankfully, He loves us very much. And, He had a plan from the beginning to bring us into salvation, to bring us back to Him.
Yeah.
And that's, like you and I's faith. That's what that's about, is living that and being a part of that and embracing that relationship. So
I love that. That's awesome. So what's next for Justin Kidd?
Well, I moved out of Idaho Falls. I actually moved out to the country.
Cool.
Moved my lab, and it's just to be at peace.
Yeah.
Honestly, I love Idaho Falls. I've been there. I bought my house when I was 19. Been in that same house ever since.
Yeah.
Just sold it, a couple of weeks ago. The move's been tough.
Yeah, for sure.
But it panned out the way it did because that's the way it needs to be.
Yeah.
And so I do have a couple of projects that I'm going to try and market here soon, but I'm going to really focus on my writing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to put it out there. And the thing is I don't want anybody to judge. I mean, it's kind of, you can't help it, to judge what I bring out as far as information based on me.
Yeah.
Right? Because I am just as faulty. I got my things too, man. And so I'm sure people will be like, well, firefighters know me all over the place. We get out on the line, we do our thing, and yep, I'm a rough around the edges, to say the least. I have my faults, and I have my sin. But we all do.
We all do.
We all do.
And the truth is, the older I get and the more I learn and the more faulty I see people, some of the faultiest people out there are the ones I want to learn from.
Amen.
So.
And I realize reading the Bible, too, that God likes edgy people. He wants somebody who gets the job done. They're not perfect by any means.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at any one of them. Anyone.
That's the unique part about the Bible is in many religious texts, or, you can look into like Greek mythology or whatever, they're kind of perfect in that, Hercules was Hercules.
Right, yes.
Well, in the Bible, they're all just as flawed as I am.
Absolutely.
Yet they led the Israelites.
Yeah, God trusted them to get something done on His behalf, and that's, but it's like, edgy. Some of them, I mean, you have everything from adultery to murder.
Yep.
And the people that God chose to bring forth information and to lead His people, and they weren't perfect. In fact, very imperfect, but they knew how to get the job done. Sometimes they had to break a couple eggs to do God's will, and they did. And He knew that they would persist. Yeah. And that's why where I'm at, some things have been very hard in my life. Like here as of recently, there's been some relationship things and just money things. Yeah. But it's amazing because when I think like I'm just ready to throw in the towel, like I can't sustain this, a blessing comes and you know it for what it is when it shows up. Right, I see what you're doing here. I mean, this is amazing, dude. I remember when you first started doing it, we went out to lunch, had Mexican food, right? And we were talking about the future and what we plan to do, and you're doing it. Oh, and I know you're we have a lot of things in common as far as our faith and our love for the Lord, and these blessings are the things that's what He wants you to do because you have power in that, and you're including Him in what you're doing because that's what He wants you to do, and that's why you're successful.
Oh, thank you.
So, and I'm just tickled for you. This has been so cool to come up here and see what you built here.
Oh, well, I appreciate you coming on and chatting. It's good to see you again after all these years.
Good to see you too, brother. Really, very much so.
I just more than wish you the best for everything.
Thank you.
I want to talk about, not right now on the podcast, but just some of your projects and if there's any way that I can help out with marketing or whatever.
I would absolutely love that. I need somebody to kind of take me by the hand, or either that or just to partner up and say, look, you stuff me in my lab and I'll produce something every week for you that you could go out and sell the crap out of. Yeah. Right. And you do what you do amazingly good and I'll do what I do all right, and we can combine efforts. But if I could find that person out there, I have a basement full of things I've invented. Some of them patented, some of them not. I think they're all pretty spiffy. Yeah. Oh yeah. But like the battery charger, the flash charger, that could save billions of dollars. Yeah. And throwing away batteries. Like I have a set of batteries I've been recharging for 4 years. Yeah. Bought a set, dude. No more like, oh, the battery's out of the remote. It's like, get out of here. And you flip a switch for a few seconds and put it back in there. It's like brand new. Yeah, that's crazy. And that stuff does exist. But everybody's like, well, why can't I buy it? Yeah. and there's a reason for that.
For sure.
So,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Justin. I appreciate it.
brother.
And we'll chat soon.
okay, awesome.